Right, so we're back with another Power Rankings, Week 23 edition. And let's start straight away with 23. In last place, we have a new last place team in the Power Rankings. And this team was in 22nd last week, and I thought they hit rock bottom. Well, this week they just hit another new rock bottom. Chicago, of course, have now lost 6 in a row after the RSL loss. And there is just, right now, this is a team that has went from a team that was above the red line and looked like they were one of those teams were fighting for the playoff hope and maybe winning it, to now just go on this depth spiral and go on this massive kind of cliffhanger of a 6-game losing streak. And now they are not only 6 points behind the playoff lines, but they are also played the most game in the Eastern Conference. I mean, that's bad for Chicago. And I just don't know how it's going to get worse for this team. I mean, this team right now, with how bad this losing streak has been, they're actually now closer to last place than they are actually from making the playoffs. It is just absolutely insane. But yeah, Chicago, of course, are in the last spot, and in 22nd, this team dropped 1 spot from last week, and that, of course, is Orlando. Now, to be fair, Orlando, they did get a draw in that game that they probably should have lost, but at the same time, once again, the defense just almost non-existent in that game, and some of the goals that they have conceded are just so schoolboy defending. And I just think for Orlando City, this team it's really hard to figure out, is this team actually going to make the playoffs or not? Because I still think this team are still kind of like having an outside shot of making the playoffs. I mean, they're still one of those teams that is fighting for those 2 spots in the playoff race. But if you look at how bad this defense is, that is probably the reason why maybe they're not going to make the playoffs. And add to the fact that they only have won 1 game in like 14 matches. I mean, that is a very pathetic kind of streak. And even bringing a new manager, James O'Connor, which I really think he has done a little bit better job than what Jason Kreis has done, but it's not really a big difference. I mean, that defense is still garbage, and as long as they don't win games, they are not going to make the playoffs. And in 21st, and this team dropped 4 spots from last week, and this is the new low for Houston, because I think this is the lowest that they've been so far in my power rankings. And the reason why I ranked them so low is that they lost a huge home game against Sporting KC, and a game where they kind of just lost their heads and got 3 players sent off. And for Houston right now, their playoff picture is not looking very good, and especially the fact that they have now started to do things that they didn't do last season, which is drop points at home and losing games at home. This is a concerning factor for this Houston team, and the fact that they haven't really been on a good run lately. And granted, yes, some of the losses that they have was because of bad call. I think this game was kind of one of them with the Fumayer red card, but at the same time, there's just no excuse the fact that this team shouldn't be competing. When you look at this team, I really think this could potentially be a playoff team if they didn't blow those late leads. I mean, I've been talking about Houston all season long about the late leads that they've been blowing. And although in that Sporting KC game, it wasn't really a late lead because they never had a lead in the first place, they look really soft whenever the 75th minute mark hits, and just they look like a team that looked like the worst team in the league in the last 15 minutes of the game. And in 20th, and this team was in the basement for a long time, and finally we got a win, and certainly a win that I definitely did not expect it, and a win that I'm pretty sure everybody if you're an MLS fan, are not expected, and that, of course, is the Quakes. So The Quakes have finally got a win against FC Dallas, and who would have thought that getting a win against the best team in the league was one of the possibility that we can have this season. And as bad as how this season has gone, with that win and how huge it is, and the fact that 3 other teams around them lost this week, I had to jump them over. I mean, that's probably going to be the highlights of this season for us. I mean, if I have to only mention one thing about the Quakes in terms of the highlight of the season, that, of course, it is. I mean, it is just incredible how in the world we were able to go on the road, which is something that we are terrible at it, and yet we go on the road and beat the best team in the Western Conference. Okay, I'm sorry to kind of brag a little bit about it, but guess what? If you look how bad the Quakes season has been, if you have one kind of glory moment for this season, then you gotta have to brag about it, and that, of course, is what this win means so far. But moving on, in 19th, and this team this team actually stays the same. I thought they gained 3 spots, but that was actually my Quakes team. But yeah, DC United stays at the same place because they got a draw against Montreal, and I could have moved them up because they did get a draw away, but at the same time they got a draw against Montreal. And Montreal, despite the fact that they are above the playoff line, they're still not really kind of a good team. And there were a couple of times where DC United had to rely a lot on the goalposts in this game because there was so many shots that was hit off the bar from Montreal. And the same can go with DC United too. They were also very unlucky to not win this game by hitting the goalpost. But in the end, it was a draw. And usually when there's a draw happen, I usually don't move a team up a spot or move them down 1 spot unless they're playing a good team or they're playing a bad team. And when they play a bad team and they get a draw, then they're going to have to be moving down. And if they play a good team, then they will, of course, move up. And in 18th place, this team lost 2 spots from last week. And that, of course, is Philly. And, this is a bit of a tough one because Philly, I didn't think they stand a chance against Portland. But then again, because teams around them were able to get victory and they couldn't do it, that means that they, of course, will have to drop in terms of the power rankings. And in 17th place, this team lost 4 spots from last week. And this was a team that I had high hopes a couple of games ago that maybe this team can make the playoffs. And I think I put them all the way up to 10th in the power rankings. And now they're back down to where they've been majority part of this season, which is right around this line. In fact, I kind of been moving Minnesota up here and then back down here very often between their win or loss thing. And I'm not quite sure if Loons fan actually recognize that. But for Minnesota, their playoff chances probably just got killed in that loss against the Sounders because now they have to go on the road 5 straight games. And these are no easy road games. They have to play FC Dallas, RSL, and also Sporting KC in those 5 games. And also LA Galaxy in those 5 games. And when they do come back from this brutal 5-game road trip, they got Portland at home. So, yeah, good luck, Minnesota, in terms of these games. And I just feel like they're not going to do it. I think this team, it's been a kind of a good season, you would say. Although I'm pretty sure now fans will say that it's not a great season because of what just happened yesterday when they decided to sell Christian Ramirez and traded him to LAFC, and now they pretty much have no striker besides Darwin Quintero, and they definitely want Adrian Heath to get out of that club because he is one of the guys alongside with the front office of this Minnesota team that is the reason why this team is not having success and that they are not really a team that could propel to the next level, which is make the playoffs. And in 16th place, this team moved up 3 spots from last week, and I think this is one of the highest I put Colorado in my power rankings. But yeah, they definitely deserve this rise because they beat the Galaxy, and certainly I feel Kellen Acosta has really made a big impact to this Rapids team. 2 goals in 2 games that he has appeared for the Rapids. And, the Rapids, I don't think they'll make the playoffs this season, but they're certainly a team that I think could potentially surprise a couple of team and could potentially play spoilers in a couple of team, and it was shown in that LA Galaxy game where the Galaxy thought it was just a walk in the park against the Rapids. In fact, I'm pretty sure everybody thinks that whenever they play Colorado, it's a walk in the park. And even I admit I'm kind of one of those persons, because remember how I said in my review that I said the next game the Quakes play, which is Colorado, is going to be a walk in the park, when I don't think it should be, because of how, this Colorado team at times they would turn it on and they would make it tough for you. And yeah, they can definitely surprise a couple of team down the stretch and play a little bit of a spoiler. And in 15th place, and this team is hanging on for dear life in the playoff race. Well, not really the playoff race, but the playoff red line, where they are just about to fall out of it. And that, of course, is New England, who now lost 3 spots from last week. And I think this is one of the lowest I have ranked New England ever since I started to move them up very high, because of these great performance they had back in May. But ever since the month turned to June, this team has only won once in their last 9 games. I mean, this has been an astonishing bad stretch that New England is in. And this is kind of the stretch that kind of what I thought was going to be New England of this season, where they're going to really struggle this season because they don't really have a lot of good goal scoring. Their midfield is not very good. The defense is pretty awful. And to the credit, the defense is pretty good this season. Definitely better than it is. And the reason why I still think that they're in this really bad run is that they just cannot score goals. Like they're running out of goal production from guys that you wouldn't think that was supposed to be the guy that they would be rely on goal production. Guys like Christian Pineda, Theo Bunbury, and Diego Fagundes. They're running out of goals for them to give the Revs. And although Bunbury and Pineda did score this week it was the defense that decided to be the reason why this New England team couldn't get all 3 points. And I just think that as the longer that they don't get a win for this team, if you're a Revs fan, you should hit the panic button right now, because it's not looking good for this team. And I have a feeling if they continue this, they are going to fall out of the picture, and they're going to be like Chicago, where Chicago was right there in the playoff race, and then they had this really bad run, and look where Chicago is right now. And the reason why New England is not where Chicago is that they had that good start in the first half of the season. But in 14th place, and this team moved up 4 spots from last week, and that of course is Vancouver. So Vancouver got a big draw against NYCFC, and they've been kind of in a bit of a good run, and definitely a team that want to get above the red line. I think they're only 2 points behind RSL. They're keeping the pressure on RSL to keep them winning games so RSL won't be caught by Vancouver. And for this Whitecaps team, it's kind of interesting with this team, because there's times where they look very good, and then there's times they just look absolutely awful. And Vancouver, I think, may be the reason why they're still kind of in this playoff talk, despite the fact that I really don't think they have a very good squad, is because simply Alphonso Davies. I mean, he is literally the savior of this team, and he is the reason why this team is still in this position of fighting for playoff spot. And I just wonder, what are they going to do next season when Davies does leave? And they gotta find another guy that can definitely replace his productivity, which I have a feeling that is not probably going to happen. And in 13th place, and this team dropped 2 spots from last week, and that of course is Montreal, who, that was a big 2-point drop from Montreal against DC United. And considering the fact that this is a team that has been very good against teams that are not very good, and been taking advantage of a very soft schedule in the last couple of weeks, it was quite surprising that they weren't able to get something out of DC United, although they were kind of unlucky, like I said, with DC United about the post. But still, that is a big 2-point drop to Montreal, and especially, I'm pretty sure their schedule is going to get tougher. I mean, usually when a team goes on an easy stretch, that tough part of the schedule will always kind of come around in the corner, and I just fear with this Impact team, and we know how they do when they play against good teams where they don't really look very good, this could be a team that potentially could not be making the playoffs, and even they are in 5th place. And keep in mind, this team also have played 2 more games than any other team that is around the Eastern Conference, and they have played the most game in the Eastern Conference. But in 12th place, this team moved up 3 spots from last week, and this is a spot that RSL has been kind of been in, because this is a team that can only win home games, but they just cannot win on the road. So they're kind of like a balanced kind of team. And I think 12th place, which is smack down right in the middle, kind of suit them. And, you know, they got a big win against the Fire. Well, I wouldn't say it's a big win, because with how Chicago has been doing these days, it's almost like an automatic 3 points for RSL. And, you know, for RSL, all they need to do now, if they want to make the playoffs, is they got to figure it out on the road. If they don't, then this could be a big problem for this team, because Vancouver, Seattle, and all the other team that is fighting for that playoff race are just coming around the corner of them. And in 11th place, and this team moved up 4 spots from last week, and that, of course, is Sporting KC, who finally stopped this death spiral. Granted that they did kind of get a little bit help with the fact that the Dynamo lost their heads and went down to 10 men for the majority of the game. And I still think the Sporting KC team, after that Houston game, looked nothing like the Sporting KC team that we know in the first half of the season. And I just think for the Sporting KC team, you know, they got to win, and I'm hoping that might be a way to spark their confidence and get back to where they are. But if their next game, they get a loss in that game, then, you know, I wouldn't say that this team is gonna end at their death spiral and they should get back to the top. I mean, it's funny how this team was 5th last week, and now they jump up to 3rd place. And it also kind of explains how tight the Western Conference is. And in 10th place, and this team dropped 2 spots from last week, and that, of course, is LAFC, who is actually started to stumble in my power rankings, because they are started to not win games. And, you know, I think this week I understand why they lost this game, because 1, they have to play against the Red Bulls, then the Red Bulls are very good, and 2, they have a midweek US Open Cup semifinal game, and I'm pretty sure that is a very important thing for LAFC, so they didn't really decided to really kind of focus on that game. And you know, hopefully in that midweek game, if they do win their US Open Cup semifinal, which I think they should, because Houston is not having a very good run lately. And really, I think if you look at, just talking about the US Open Cup for a second, I think LAFC is pretty much the outright favorite right now, because if you look at the team that is remain in the US Open Cup, with teams like Philly, Chicago, and Houston, yeah, you would think that LAFC should be the one that are favored and should be able to beat all those teams. So they're definitely going to be the favorites to win the whole thing. And if LAFC does win the whole thing, they will be the first team since 1997 where the Chicago Fire was able to win the US Open Cup in the first year. And what's interesting about that Chicago Fire team is that is actually managed by the same guy that is managing this team, which is Bob Bradley. But in 9th place, going back to the power rankings, as I kind of got a little bit off track with the US Open Cup stuff, and this is their neighbor, their noisy neighbor, that have dropped 4 spots from last week, and that, of course, is the Galaxy. So the Galaxy had a very good run of 9 games unbeaten, but it kind of got all crashed down when they lost to the Rapids. And because of that, and because of the teams that are around them have, either got a resort, and I really think this is probably the most painful loss out of all those other teams that also lost games. You know, yeah, I mean that the Galaxy. I just think that this is a team that is just, it's kind of like they really rely on Zlatan, and if Zlatan is not there, then this team could definitely be screwing. That's the worry thing I have with the Galaxy when playoff time come. Like, what happened if playoff time come and Zlatan, his legs is gonna get tired? What's gonna happen with this team? And also the fact that what's gonna happen with this defense, because like Orlando City, their defense is just as bad as it is. But in 8th place, and this team dropped 3 spots from last week, and that, of course, is NYCFC. So, yeah, for NYCFC, this has not been a good kind of last couple of weeks for you guys, because, there's been games that you have drew, there's been games that you also have lost, and in this game they drew against Vancouver. They gave up a late goal, and they lost ground in the Supporter Shield race, and I'm pretty sure that is the one thing that NYCFC really want to care about. And I just think that from what I've seen from NYCFC, it looked like right now this is a team that is going through a time where they are, since they changed their manager with Patrick Vieira leaving and Dom Turin coming in to this team, it looked like they're just changing the style of play, and when usually that happens, guys is going to take a couple of weeks to learn this system. And I think right now with NYCFC and how guys are not really kind of learning this system very well, that's why they're starting to drop points. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of why this NYCFC team has been kind of a little bit struggle in these last couple of weeks, not getting wins like they always tend to do so far this season. But yeah, they dropped 3 spots from last week, and in 7th place, this team stays where they are from last week, which is Columbus, because they didn't play a single game this week, so they, of course, stays at the same spot. And in 6th place, this team dropped 3 spots from last week, and to be fair, I think I was being a little bit generous in terms of this power rankings to FC Dallas, because I could have easily dropped them very low in the power rankings. I could have probably dropped them to 9th in the power rankings because of the fact that they lose to the worst team in the league. I mean, I kind of spare them a little bit, but at the same time, that was not a good loss. I mean, you cannot lose to the worst team in the league. And especially, I thought FC Dallas was probably one of the team that can maybe sneak into that Supporter Shield race. Yeah, that loss is going to be very damaging. And, that is one of those losses that I hope it doesn't really start a chain reaction of loss. I mean, I remember last season for FC Dallas, if I can maybe think of one loss that maybe sparked kind of a chain reaction of them start having that death spiral, I would say it probably should be the Quakes match, where they lost that home game and then they started to go on like a bad run, and people thought, oh, it was just one of those kind of thing where each team always has a bad run. But no, they just kind of spiral out of control, and I'm hoping FC Dallas won't be the same this year. But in 5th place, this team moved up 5 spots from last week, and this is the highest that Seattle has been for a while. I don't think this might be the highest they've been, although I do remember I kind of ranked them very high in my preseason power rankings. But yeah, Seattle is in 5th place because they've been on a very good run, and they are already starting their annual revival of the second half season, where they somehow just make the playoffs despite the fact that they had such a bad first half of the season. And what's interesting about this Sounders team and their revival is that this is a team that's been reviving and getting wins, not in a way that you would definitely like, and I'm pretty sure a lot of Sounders fans won't like the way that they've been doing it, and maybe they're worried that kind of magic moment that the Sounders will have whenever they always tends to find a way to nick a goal in a game and win a game or get a result is going to run out. But, as long as they're winning, I think we shouldn't be complaining about them, and that we shouldn't be complaining that they are moving up the power rankings. Although I think this might be as high as I would put Seattle on the power rankings, unless they keep winning and unless some other teams in the top 5 will start dropping. And in 4th place, and this is another team that's been in the dead last and also started their revival, and that of course is TFC, who, I moved them 5 spot. I made them the biggest mover alongside with Seattle, but at the same time, TFC did have that red card, and maybe I should have docked points for them in terms of that. But at the same time, when you look at TFC and how finally they got a lot of their guys back in this team, I think this is a team that is gonna finally make the revival and kind of like making their charge up the standings that we kind of been think about throughout the season. And I think that's one of the different between Seattle. We didn't think Seattle was going to do it again. For TFC, we kind of expected that, and it's just when are they going to really do it, and it looked like they finally started to kick into gear. And in 3rd place, this team moved up 2 spots from last week, and that, of course, is the Red Bulls, or actually, they moved up 3 spots from last week. And for the Red Bulls, big win against LAFC. In fact, a massive win for them because they were probably the winner for the Supporter Shield race, since they're the only team in the Supporter Shield race that is in like the top 4 that actually got a win. So they made up ground to Atlanta in terms of the Supporter Shield race. And speaking of Atlanta, for the first time in a long time, and I don't remember the last time I actually put Atlanta not number 1 in my power rankings, but it feels like this is finally the right time to do it. And even though you would think, why should I do it now that they actually drew to TFC? It's the reason why I decided to do it now is because there's been times where Atlanta, when they play in these big games, they have not delivered. And I'm starting to see a trend of this with how when they play TFC, they drew 2-2. When they play against NYCFC, earlier in the season, they drew 2-2 in those games. When they play against FC Dallas, they lost 3-2. When they play against Portland, they drew 1-1. And when they play against Seattle, they also drew 1-1. So there's been times when they play against big teams, they have definitely not looked good. And that is a worrying factor for Atlanta, because if you're a team that are unable to beat these big teams in the playoffs, then what happened when playoff time comes and when you have to play against these big teams? You're not going to be playing against like easy team like DC United or Montreal or even any of the easy teams that is in the Eastern Conference and some of the easy team in the Western Conference. You are going to face some really tough opponent, and that might be a big concern I have with Atlanta. As much as I've been giving Atlanta a lot of kind of credit, and I think some people will say I'm kind of a little bit biased toward Atlanta of saying how good they are when considering the fact that there's been times where they have not looked good, and that I think probably the biggest weakness for them is that when they play against big opponent in a big game, they aren't able to deliver it. Well, that is exactly what the case is. So with that being said, since Atlanta is at 2nd place, the new number 1, and I think it's about time that we have to give recognition to the Timbers in terms of this unbeaten streak. I mean, when I start this power rankings, I talked about how the power ranking works and how it's all about form and all about how also about how each team perform in each game. And when you look at this Portland team, those kind of things that I said in the preseason has all been checked in terms of what they've been doing in these last couple of months. I mean, to go almost 16 games, or not almost, but I think they're now 16 games unbeaten, or 15 games. I'm kind of started losing track, but they've been on this incredible unbeaten streak, and kind of a historic unbeaten streak too, because I think they have just tied the longest unbeaten streak that they ever had in club history. I mean, that has to be recognized, and I think this Portland team, if you look at how they've been doing so far, they are rising up the table, and now they're in 2nd place right now in the Western Conference, and technically, if you even count the points per game ratio, they have the best in the Western Conference. They are actually going to potentially catch up to FC Dallas and take that first spot. And if they can continue this unbeaten streak and they win those game in hand that they have against a couple of teams, they could be maybe a serious threat for Supporters Shield kind of race. And this is one of the team I have never mentioned the fact that they could be in Supporters Shield kind of contention, but because of how Portland has been and how they continued to go on this unbeaten streak, the longer this unbeaten streak goes for Portland, the more dangerous they're going to be in the Supporters Shield racing. Because if you're a Supporters Shield race kind of contention team, and you see a team that is going on this long unbeaten streak and how they're just going to continue this unbeaten streak, they're going to continue to find a way to either get wins or draw, it must be stressing you out that you have to do the same thing, and that if you lose, you know that you're going to lose ground to that team that is going to go on this that continue this unbeaten streak. So I think for Portland right now, they can continue this unbeaten streak, then no doubt this team could be a big surprise in terms of the Supporters Shield race, and that you would be shocked that this team should, if they of course would be win this one, when you shouldn't be, consider of how long their unbeaten streak has been, and how this is a team that, you know, since this unbeaten streak has begun, a lot of people don't realize that for the first 5 games they were actually winless, and that the unbeaten streak all started when they had a 5-game or I think 6-game winless run to start the season. And it's just incredible how this team has been. And, you know, all credits has to be in terms of not only the players on this team, but also Giovanni Savarese in terms of how he has completely turned this team around. I mean, I remember earlier in the season we questioned about this Portland team, and we questioned if Savarese is the right man to do it. And literally, we know 15 weeks later, we know that he definitely is the right man to do it. But either way, that is pretty much it for my power rankings. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this power ranking? Did I make your team a little bit too high, or did I make your team a little bit too low? Let me know in the comments below. And yeah, I hope to see you guys next time.